Continuing our studies in Tzedakah and in tithing, or Tzedakah and maaseh. So who is obligated in this mitzvah, in this commandment of giving tzedakah? So we look at several sources, and we see that any man who has reached the age of majority, which would be bar mitzvah, 13 years and 1 day, is obligated in this mitzvah of tzedakah. Now, we already mentioned earlier what is tzedakah. And tzedakah is not necessarily alms or charity as we think about it, but rather establishing justice. So when a person gives, he's establishing or acting in a just manner. Once a woman has reached the age of majority, which would be bat mitzvah, or 12 years and 1 day, she's also obligated in the mitzvah of tzedakah, the same as any other mitzvah which is not bound by time. Now, a woman who is single, widowed, or divorced, has complete ownership of any money which she earns, and therefore she follows the same guidelines in giving tzedakah as a man. Married women, however, we'll look at this for a second, is a little bit different. A husband has the obligation to completely support his wife, mezonot. However, a wife working has the right to keep her earnings, maaseh yadayim, provided that she releases her husband from his obligation to provide mezonot. In the event that the wife chooses not to seek independent employment, or even if she does but no quid pro quo arrangement has been made, vice versa, mezonot, the maaseh yadeha, all earnings then belongs to the husband. That being the case, one would not be permitted to accept a sizable donation from a woman, since technically it's not her money. It belongs to her husband, unless she has, as it were mentioned before, said, look, do not provide for me, I will provide for myself. This, by the way, you'll see this also a very interesting case that we have even in the Tanakh, in Yeshayahu chapter 4, when many women would marry one man in order to escape being enslaved by the non-Jewish armies that was invading Israel, and there was a lack of men, as it were. There were more women than men, and therefore you read the passage in Isaiah 4 that for every several women they would attach themselves to one man, and they said, don't provide for me for clothes or for food, which are some of the basic obligations that man has towards a woman, just conjugal rights, in other words, the status of being married or connected to the man. And this also plays a part in this whole concept of what is a married woman obligated to do. So that being the case, one would not be permitted to accept a sizable donation from a woman, since technically it's not her money. But in the other case, and in the event that she has been, as it were, emancipated from such requirements to the man, then she would be required. However, one would be permitted to accept a small donation, a davar mu'at, from a woman, since it's understood that her husband would not object. A davar mu'at, that's a minimum amount. There's no specific amount quantifying what a small donation is. It would also depend on the wealth of each individual. Now, there's exceptions to the minimal amount of limitation. Consent, if a woman says that her husband allows her to give a large donation, one may accept any amount she gives. Working women. A woman who goes out of her way to work in order to help support her husband, besides being highly praised, would be also allowed to give large donations to tzedakah, and it would be permitted to accept them. The reason is that we can assume the husband would not mind her giving the amount she wants, since she is the one earning the money. We also have this in the pasuk of Mishle, chapter 31, that the wise woman, basically the wise and virtuous woman, she provides for her household, but in addition to that, she goes out and gives tzedakah, she gives charity. Now, to avoid potential conflict, it is advisable that the husband and wife discuss how much and to whom tzedakah should be given. Should always be in conjunction with the wife. In other words, running the finances, as it were. Woman who runs a household. In many homes, woman runs the household and does all the buying and spending, despite the husband earning the money. The wife has free reign regarding the money disbursement. According to many poskim or interpreters of halakha, a woman would be allowed to give a large donation and one would be permitted to accept it. Other poskim maintain that even though a woman may have free rein concerning household expenses, that does not necessarily mean that her husband would want to give a large donation to tzedakah. And this will prevent the problems. The husband and wife would agree among themselves how much and to whom tzedakah should be given. If a husband is moche or objects, he goes against, even though we've established in some instances where a married woman may give a larger donation, if it's known that the husband objects, it would be prohibited to accept donation or tzedakah from her under any circumstances. Now, this would include accepting a small donations from her. In the case of a woman who works and earns money, it would be prohibited to accept tzedakah from her, since, as we would have previously learned, what a woman possesses technically belongs to her husband. Whatever the woman gives from the possession is considered as if the man of the house has given it to them. There are, however, a number of exceptions to the halakha that we just mentioned, and we're going to take a look at a couple of them. Prior obligation, for example. A woman who accepted upon herself while she was still single to give certain sums of tzedakah and did not redeem her obligation prior to getting married is still obligated to pay it even after she marries. Since halakhically the married woman belongs to her husband, he is responsible to honor her commitment. Family members. A woman of means may continue to give money to members of her family who are poor, even against the wishes of her husband. Of course, this applies provided they can afford to give amounts of tzedakah. As we have previously established, a husband and wife should always discuss these issues. Now we have the issues of fine imposed by the community. Kinat. A husband is obligated to pay any fines that was placed on his wife. Similarly, a husband is obligated to pay the amount owed to tzedakah by his wife to atone for any sins which she has committed. Merit for health. Since people have the custom to give money to tzedakah for a pregnant woman, so that someone will pray on her behalf that everything goes well. If this is the custom of the wife's family, then the husband is also obligated to do this for her. A woman who is seriously ill is permitted to give tzedakah as merit for herself, even without her husband's knowledge. Returning borrowed items. If a woman has knowledge of her husband having someone else's property and does not want to return it, the wife is permitted to return the item since she is saving her husband from a sin, avera. However, if a woman knows that her husband is not giving the amount of tzedakah that he should, she is not allowed to give tzedakah for him. So here we have a very interesting situation. How about the children? Once a boy or girl has reached the age of hinuk, the age when the child can understand that what he or she is doing is a mitzvah, approximately 5 to 6 years old, he or she should be trained in this mitzvah of tzedakah, of giving. A child who earns money and has reached the age of hinuk should be taught to separate tzedakah. If a child gives tzedakah, one accepts it from him, provided it's a small amount. And one who receives a large donation from a child should make sure that the child is permitted to donate such a large sum of tzedakah. Similarly, if a child offers food or drink to a poor person in his parents' home, the poor person may accept it. How about an indigent person? An indigent person is also obligated to give tzedakah. As it was mentioned earlier, if one is permitted to accept tzedakah, has also an obligation to give tzedakah. No one is exempt really unless they're at the point that they have absolutely nothing. Two indigents who are acquainted can't fulfill their mitzvah tzedakah by giving to each other. One who owes money to people should not dispense a large amount of tzedakah. Nevertheless, he is entirely exempt from the mitzvah since everyone must give at least 1/3 of a shekel a year. However, he should make a greater attempt to pay back what he owes before contributing to the lot of tzedakah. The whole idea is to owe nobody anything is the ideal state of every single Jew. Persons who cannot afford to give tzedakah, one who collects tzedakah for the poor, is prohibited from collecting from an individual who he knows gives tzedakah every time he is asked, despite not having the means. Such a person always gives because he is embarrassed not to, regardless of the fact he cannot afford it. one is not allowed to put an individual in such a situation of embarrassment. Even if the person wants to give, one may not accept tzedakah from him. How about the non-Jews? Accepting from a non-Jew tzedakah. One should avoid accepting tzedakah from non-Jews. However, here's a big however, one is not able to raise enough funds for his needs from Jews. Jews may privately accept money from non-Jews. If, for whatever reason, one is not able to accept donations from non-Jews in private, he is permitted to accept it in public, provided it would be possible for him to live only from the donation of Jewish people. So the whole idea of public welfare is permissible to a Jew, especially if the community that they belong to is not assisting them with that help. One may also accept help through government assistance programs because it's not considered as receiving money from a non-Jew. Since the funding for such programs comes from tax dollars paid by Jews and non-Jews alike, they both qualify as donors. One should not place a pushka in places frequented by non-Jews. If, however, one did place a pushka in such a location, and animosity would be created if it would be removed, it should remain there. In other words, it is allowed for non-Jews to give money to Jews. There's no problem to that. Accepting from a non-Jew for a shul. If a Gentile gives money to a shul, it may always be accepted. One is even permitted to approach non-Jews to raise funds for such purpose. Yes, even to raise for a building fund. If a non-Jew, or even for a property. If a non-Jew donates an object to a shul, example, a menorah, it may be accepted and used provided that the non-Jew donated with the understanding that it will be also utilized the way the shul deems appropriate, or according to Jewish law. Accepting tzedakah from an Israel mumar. Who is an Israel mumar? A Jew who deliberately transgresses major commandments, Shabbat. We're talking about a Jew, perhaps, that lives like a Gentile. He wants to give tzedakah to poor people. One may accept his donation. It's questionable if tzedakah may be accepted from Israel mumar for a shul, however. It is because it become the custom to accept tzedakah for shul yeshiva from a Yisrael mumar. It has become that custom in many cases. So in this case, anyone, Jew, religious or not, or non-Jew, can give to house of worship, can give and provide to buy property, to study of Torah. Supporting a mumar or non-observant Jew. Halakhically, a Jew who purposely does not keep Shabbat is called a Yisrael mumar. And if he is indeed in need, one should not give him tzedakah. You heard that right. One should not give tzedakah. Hopefully, by the pressures pressed, he will do shuvah and become datim, become observant. However, there are different halachot regarding someone who does not know any better, does not have a Jewish upbringing. So you have to be very careful. Today, most non-observant Jews do not know any better and would be obligated to support them if they are in need. So charity to everyone. And everyone is obligated to give tzedakah. When one is in doubt, one should consult your local rabbi or rav. Now, giving questionable organizations. One should be very careful to give tzedakah money to organizations that follows the dictates of the Torah. Therefore, one should not give tzedakah to organizations which are known to disperse money to places that do not follow the dictates of Torah. This is one of the reasons why many Jewish organizations do not support organizations that promote avodah zarah, idolatry. And idolatry is clearly defined in halakha in many passages. So this is one of the aspect as well. So this is one of the reasons why our organizations does not promote idolatry, but rather halakhic in Torah teachings. Supporting one who's deficient in his character. One is obligated to give tzedakah to one who's lacking midot and has character flaws. He could be a shyster, as it were. He has problems. Supporting non-Jewish charity. Can we give donations to non-Jewish charities? One is permitted to give tzedakah to non-Jewish charities in order to facilitate peaceful coexistence between Jews and non-Jews. In addition, there are many non-Jewish charities that are in existence that basically helps, for example, the medical world, health issues of awareness to issues of the body, to the poor people, food for the hungry. So many different charities, even, for example, cancer treatment. They're helping children to try to cure them from cancer. So yes, there are ways to be able to support many of these charities. But there are some charities you're not allowed to, as a Jew, to support. And I just mentioned one of them, which are entities that has to do with promoting idolatry. Now, we're going to take a look at other aspects of fulfilling this mitzvah tzedakah. But we're going to stop here with who is obligated to give tzedakah. Hope you enjoyed, and continue watching and sharing these teachings, because the more you learn, the better you make yourself and the better you make the whole world around you. Shalom Aleichem, and have a wonderful week. Shalom.